What's up, y'all? First of all, I'm Jay. You'll learn more about me on the next slide. Don't worry about that. Does anybody know where this picture was taken? Obviously, the Container Store. Thank you. What city this was taken in? Pasadena. On what street? I'm joking. You don't gotta tell me. So I took this picture today because we're going to be talking about containers, and I ate lunch across the street from the Container Store, so I am well qualified to at least help you with your home decorating needs. Hi, y'all. I'm Jay Miller. I work for Microsoft. My pronouns are they, them. When I'm not advocating for Microsoft, I'm advocating for developers of color like myself. If you are interested in that, talk to me later. If you're a classic Tetris fan, talk to me later. I've got a date with my NES when I get home tomorrow. About 3 hours of dropping blocks. I love it. And also, if you want to get in touch with me, that's how you can do it. I got some ground rules. You might notice me pacing. I got diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 29. Everyone else knew except for me. So if you need to stem, if you need to take notes, draw doodles, play with your phone, do any of those things, I'm totally cool with that because I would be doing the same thing if I was listening to me talk. Laughing is encouraged. You can laugh at me, you can laugh at my slides, you can laugh when things break, you can laugh when things work. Questions, I like them too, but wait until I ask for them. I will get distracted, and then I will forget everything. Right now, I'm in mid-blackout mode, and if I come back to, I'm going to freeze. And comments, those are different than questions. Check the punctuation on the end. If you have a comment, I ask that you just catch me out in the hallway. I'm more than happy to talk about it, but unfortunately, this is my talk, not yours. So with that being said, I've got some assumptions that are going to make this pretty easy. How many people here know what Docker is? This is going to go great. How many people know what containers are in general? Okay, if you knew what Docker was, I expected the hand to stay up. How many people have heard of GitHub? Okay, cool. We are like 3 for 3. Everybody is going to be on track. So, all that out of the way, I've got some disclaimers. Me, I'm a Python developer. If you see examples and they're written in Python, that's why. This talk is not a Python talk. So even though the examples are in Python, you should be able to take anything that I say and do and apply it into your language of choice, even if that language is YAML. I don't know why it would be YAML, but hey, containers got it right, sometime. I do work for Microsoft. Microsoft did pay for me to come out here and talk about this. I want to get that out of the way, take everything that I say with that grain of salt. However, everything here that I'm going to talk about should be available to you for free, or there is a generous free option, and I will specify the difference when we get there. And I believe in everything that I'm talking about personally because it has helped me. And now we're going to jump into story time. So, I was a developer. I was writing some code, and I was like, man, I would love it if someone could help me write my code. How do I encourage people to write code contribute to my project? Yeah, see, the truth comes out. And this is how many people have been in that position before? You've written some code, and you're like, open source for the win. Where is the open part of the open source? Like, I am the source. Where is my open? Where is the community that is going to jump in? Where is the video and the YouTube channel saying, hey, I found this super cool repo. You should totally check it out. Where are my thousands of stars? Unfortunately, yes, this is a common thought, and I'm not the only one. You're not the only one. In fact, one of my great friends and mentors, Brian Douglas, told me after one of my hackathon, or one of my Hacktoberfest projects had 4 contributors to it. 4. Faux, as we say, where I come from. I had 4 contributors, and I was so proud of it. I put it on Twitter. I was like, yes, we've done this. And he was like, congratulations, you were 1 contributor away from being in the 0.1% of public repos on GitHub in terms of contributions. 4. Well, 5 to get there. 4. I'm still looking for that 5th one. If you want to be that person, come find me. But let's look at this timeline. In 2018, GitHub announced that they had 100 million repos, and at the time, they had 31 million developers. Okay, in 2022, they announced they had 100 million users, and that's great. And the number of repos tripled. So imagine being 0.1% with 4 contributors. And that means there are less than 500,000 repos on GitHub in its entirety that have more than 4 contributors. And we saw this too with Nadia Ingbal's book. I love this book, it's so good. Working in Public. It talks about what most of these projects are. Everybody wants to be a federation or a club. A federation, not Fediverse. We're not talking about Mastodon. If you want 4 people to join your Fediverse, ask everyone in here, I guess. We want to be a stadium. We want to have a bunch of people coming to our projects, but that is not the case. In fact, even though we want to be all of those things, most of us are in the toy category. Low contributors, low users. So I hate to break it to you, but if you build it, they will not come. But I hope we can change that. So I changed my verbiage around. I changed the I's to we's and the my's to R's. How do we encourage people to contribute to our projects? Well, we got to think about that. First of all, if I am a developer on either side of that coin, what do I want? And this is where I'm going to let you know the 4th rule. If I ask a question and I look out in the audience like a deer about to get hit by a truck, that means I'm wanting answers. So, as a developer who has written some code, what do you want other people to actually do? What does contribution mean? Review it and make it deliverable. I like that. Give me testable. Anything else? Be documented. Okay, I like that. Okay, know what the policies are to actually do the work so that you don't have to send back 5 comments that says needs docs, needs tests. This doesn't follow the schema of our project. Please try again. I basically wrote a little Python string here that just says, as a developer, I want to, my code, quickly, reliably, and as easy as possible, right? Maintainers want to maintain their code quickly, reliably, as easy as possible. Contributors want to contribute to code quickly, reliably, and as easy as possible. Reviewers want to review code quickly, reliably, and... Okay, cool. Again, public participation. I love this. So, who knows what this fruit is? Durian. What is the key trait of durian? It's very delicious. Okay, what else? It smells. Writing code often smells. Writing public code often smells. And I'm not talking about code smells. I'm talking about the experience that is bringing someone else's code into your environment and figuring out what you have to do with it. It is absolutely horrible for someone like me who didn't grow up doing those things. So instead, what we want is this other thing. Those are durian chips. They smell less, they're prepackaged, and they taste like durian mostly tastes. I'm not going to tell you that the experience is 100% better, but it's a lot more convenient. Now, this is where we start talking about dev containers and containerization, and a lot of folks, especially at a place like Scale, are going to say, well, we've already solved this problem. Our team has a series of Docker images that we all use to develop. Unfortunately, when you have a series of Docker images that you have to develop, you then have to maintain that. And by the way, if you are the project that some random person who is in Nebraska has been thankfully or thanklessly maintaining, let me pause and say thank you, because I know I rely on a few. But also, if that little peg is your Docker container and your entire project is all of that stuff above it, if you go, I mean, I'm sorry, but if you go, we've got a big problem. If you decide that you're going to stop maintaining that thing all of a sudden, we've got a massive problem. And not to mention, if you look here, we bolded the word team. Most of the team stuff is already covered. Now, we're going to talk about how Devcontainers can also improve for your team, but you're not going to share your series of Docker containers in your code repo for someone who probably doesn't have Docker installed on their computer to use, has probably never ran Docker before to use. Not to mention, they're not going to sit there and read the Docker file or the docker compose.yaml to figure out what's even going on. They wanted to make a change to your documentation. They wanted to write some tests. They wanted to update your README. They didn't want to install the thing on their MacBook Air that is going to turn into a loaf of bread after you've installed Docker on it. So, this is where Devcontainers come in. Devcontainers are an open spec. It was created by Microsoft. And the idea was to take a lot of the maintenance of having a Docker image or a Docker file and all of those things and make it so that it was easily dispersible to all kinds of developers out there. Now, we're going to talk about some of those developers later. It's currently in use by VS Code and Writer. There's also a Devcontainer CLI tool, which allows you to create those images in the terminal. And there is also support for code spaces. How many people here know what code spaces is? Okay, about half and half. How many of those people actually use code spaces? Ooh, okay, we're gonna hopefully fix that number later. Okay, so code spaces are the ability to create a developer environment inside of your browser. So all that Docker stuff, all that stuff that you gotta use that makes your laptop fry, you don't have to put that on your computer. You can just put that on someone else's machine, let them handle it. Trust me, they've got the storage and capacity and all that stuff. Let them do it. And then you go into a browser, you click one button, well, 3 buttons technically, but you click some buttons and now you're in an environment that has all the things that you need to readily develop, deploy, test, document, and do all these things. So, we are going to get started with Devcontainers, and I'm only going to be talking about 3 components of Devcontainers. Honestly, the 3 will get you really, really far, and once you're a little confident, as my mom would say, once you start smelling yourself a little bit, then we can talk about all the extra features, and don't worry, I'll give you links for all that later. Those 3 components are the image, the settings, and the features. So before I jump into this, I have another story. I've been happily married for 9 years, going on 10 years this July. Okay, I had to check in my head, what's my past? So when I proposed to my wife, we were in one of the most beautiful parts of San Diego. It was Seaport Village, right along the coastline, right next to the USS Midway, and there was a guy stacking rocks on these little bitty beams. And this was a recreation of our first date. That same guy was there, and I sat there mesmerized at this guy. He's stacking these rocks on these little bitty sticks, little metal pole, and I'm just like, how is he doing that? I really wonder how he's doing that. And he's just like grabbing things, and my wife and I date, and I spend all of our time dating wondering how I'm kidding, no, I spend all that time focusing on building a relationship and all that stuff. But when I go to propose to her, we get to that man right there, and I go, I figured it out. The reason you're able to stack these rocks on these little bitty poles is, one, that you're on a flat surface, so that way the stick isn't all wobbed out, and also you're choosing the biggest, flattest rock possible as the base. So it's that strong foundation that makes for all the other stuff. And then that's when I got into all the romantic stuff. I was like, oh yeah, our relationship foundation, yada, 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 marry me, okay? So yeah. In this instance, the image is your strong foundation. It is going to be the thing that is built on. When you're using Docker, it is your Docker image. Now, on top of that, you're going to throw some features on it. And then you're going to modify some of those features in your environment with the settings. So that's how I want you to think about this when we talk about images, features, settings. The image is your base. The features augment those things. The settings make your experience look dope. All right? So the bare minimum required to get your dev container up and going is just that image. Dev containers are written with JSON. You use a devcontainer.json file inside of your build environment or your build folder. If you're using VS Code, it's .vs Code. So you have .vs Code.devcontainer, and you can have a JSON file that just has a name and an image, and that's it. Yes, I know that JSON is invalid. I just saw the comma. Don't call me out. I don't write JSON for a living, okay? Now, this is an image that Microsoft maintains and manages. We keep them up to date. We do all that work. So it's not one person in Nebraska. Again, if you are that person, thank you very much. But all this is going to do is throw that image on. And it's going to give you what would happen if you just opened up a Docker file and called that image. So there's a little bit more that you can do with that. And this is actually how I recommend that you build your base dev container. And that's via a Docker file. Now, don't get scared. You don't got to do a whole lot of work here. All my Docker file is that same image and a run command that's just going to do the bare minimum to get your Linux instance off to the races. And then inside of your dev container, you're just going to call Docker file. You're going to point it to your actual Docker file. You can pass in arguments in. So, like me, I'm using Python 3.11 because Python 3.11 go fast, really fast. I love how fast it is. We can talk about that later. But let's say for my project, you need to be running Python 3.10 instead. Perfectly fine. Instead of having to manipulate your Docker file now, you just have to manipulate that one argument there. That's great. You set a context. I don't know. It told me to set the context, so I set the context. These are the rules. I just follow them. And that's it. This is the bare minimum to get a dev container off to the races. And again, this isn't even the bare minimum. That's the bare minimum. This is the bare minimum that I would recommend. Yeah. So, we're about to play a little game. This one involves some audience participation. As I mentioned before in my super amazing rock metaphor, the features are the things that you use to augment your experience. I'm going to show you a picture, and I want you to yell as loud as you can what you think the features are in this picture. Ready? Okay, here's the picture. This is a child riding a bicycle. What are the things in this picture making this experience a little bit more pleasant? The dad, I like that. The training wheels. The helmet. Okay. Y'all are getting smiles. People, you're in the right mindset to actually do the work. I like that. All right, I think I heard all the ones that I wrote down except for one, which is fine. So yeah, we got the dad. That's right. We got the helmet. I put the little cushion things on because when you're a little kid, you start getting the wobbles, and if you slip, that's no fun. The training wheels, absolutely. I would have said the fact that they got those cheap brakes, but my daughter is 4 and she's learning how to ride a bike, and I can promise you that worsens the experience. I would cut her brake cable if I could, just so she stops doing this as I'm trying to get her to go forward. But yes, all of these things make the riding experience better. And this is exactly what features do. Features help you get that functionality out of your dev container without complicating your Docker file. So I saw some people that they're not great in the Docker space. By the way, these QR codes will take you places. I will probably tell you where they take you. This will take you to the dev container feature spec. Feel free to go check that out. But having those features prevents you from having to add a gigantic shell script or point to a shell script that you have to maintain inside of your Docker file. Instead, you just point to the feature repo, and now it's someone else's problem. Sorry, I'm just saying it the way I see it. And I do have a little video here that I'm gonna show. It's a simple one. I use VS Code. I use VS Code in Vim mode because I'm a sucker for pain. But sometimes I get really, really silly and I go into the terminal inside of VS Code and I expect NeoVim to be there. So when I open up a dev container, I'm gonna hit play here. When I open up a dev container and it doesn't work, this is me opening up the dev container. I'm not gonna tell you whether or not it was sped up or not, it was, I'm sorry. It does take a little bit of time. But I type in NeoVim not found. What? This is dumb, okay? I'm gonna pause it there. Can I pause it there? Will it let me pause it? I don't know if it'll let me pause. Okay, I think it did. Sweet. Okay. So, all I did was add the features and a link to that feature, which is GHCR, Devcontainers, features in NeoVim. That's all I added. In VS Code, if I hit it again, here we go. Okay, I hit it again. I tell it to reload that same container. So this is creating a Docker container on my local machine, not this local machine, because this local machine would turn into a crisp, but my local machine at home. So now I run NeoVim, and now NeoVim is added. So you don't have to worry about all the things. Now I'm gonna tell you why you don't wanna do this later. I kind of already hinted at it earlier in here, in that features, while yes, they are super awesome, they come at a cost. I'll explain that cost in more detail, but basically the more features you add, it's running these things after it has created your base image. Therefore, it's going to slow down the time to get you to coding. And that leaves the last big feature, which is settings. Settings, if done correctly, should not affect your dev container from running in any capacity. So this has nothing to do with making your dev container up and run. What this does is this nicens the experience of that end user on the other end. A good example of this is, how many people have, or do we have any Python developers in the room? Because I'm gonna get really Python nerdy. Okay, cool, we got some. How many people have ran Python and then realized that they're in the wrong Python environment? Okay, yep. Okay, we've seen that. So, VS Code has this great setting that allows you to set your Python environment. This is an option that you could put in settings so that anybody that ever runs your dev container will automatically use the virtual environment that you have included. I'm going to mention this, do not include virtual environments. There are better ways to do this. You could also have them to create the virtual environment on the fly. Do not put your virtual environments in your source code. It is bloat. But what if you're using something like Anaconda? You can still set this to say, hey, we're a Conda environment. We use Conda in this house, so your default Python environment needs to be Anaconda and not a virtual environment. So now, when that person goes in and types Python for the first time, or they go and they do import pandas, because that's what they're gonna do if they're using Conda probably, it'll already be installed and they're gonna be in the right environment. They're not gonna be looking at it like, why does it say that pandas isn't, they can't find pandas, I don't know. So these are settings. You can also use things in settings. You can adjust things like screen size and manipulation. Anything that you can do in your VS Code settings file, you can actually set as a default setting inside of your dev container. You can also do things like recommend which extensions should be installed for this too. So if you're using a Jupyter notebook and you want to try out like Data Wrangler, you can actually make sure that anytime someone comes into your repo and they pull it down, Data Wrangler is included in that initial build. I mentioned there were some other things. We're not going to talk about the other things. The other things are not important. I'm kidding. The other things are important. The other things give you a little bit more of that Docker functionality that some people who are comfortable using Docker are used to. These are things like, what do I do after my image has been built, after everything has been ran and we're ready to go? Sometimes I like to use these for like, if I have requirements that need to be installed, my post start command will be, pip python -m pip -- upgrade, and then my packages so that, or the real way that I do it is I use a tool called pip tools, and I say pip tools compile -- upgrade, and then it upgrades all of my packages to make sure that I'm on the right track. A better way to do this is to have a dependabot file in there and let dependabot handle that for you, but that's a different talk. And again, there are a bunch of commands here. You can even set what default user you want. This could be useful if you're doing something like database management and things like that, and you need to have like certain user accounts set up. You can say, hey, load this image as this user that the system is expecting. Again, I'm not here to give you best security practices. I'm here to tell you what you can do with it, not what you should do with it. Consult with your expert in that field before taking any of this as gospel. Now, we're going to go through a couple of container examples because I promised, and that was the name of the talk, it was like Devcontainers for all types of developers. So this is going to be the basic format that you're looking at. You're going to look at what type of container base are we looking at, what type of suggested features are we talking about, and then what other extensions and things like that might I recommend. Again, I'm a Python developer. I'm doing this from the perspective of a Python developer. Replace my Python things with your language things, and it should work just fine. You might notice on here I put Docker Compose. Yes, Devcontainers do work for Docker Compose .yaml files. The caveat to that is you have to specify what service you want it to run, and that's going to be set in stone. That is important, and we will talk about that in just a second. But we're going to start with my favorite, package maintainers. I have a few packages on PyPI. I do not suggest you download any of them. They are not great, but they work for me. But as a package maintainer, I have to think about this. How am I packaging my tool? Am I using something like Poetry? How am I testing my tool? Am I using something like PyTest? And how am I managing my docs? Am I using something like DocuSource? Honestly, no, I'm not. I'm using MakeDocs. But again, I'm going to get distracted by my own decisions here. These are things that you can include in your base image. You can make sure that you have DocuSource up and running. You can make sure that your requirements.txt file has PyTest in it. And you can make sure that your build commands are centered around Poetry, since Poetry has their own run commands. You can also use this for things like version management. I will suggest be very, very smart about what you put inside of your dev container and what you put in something like GitHub Actions. Dev containers are by design not a CI/CD tool. So don't expect your people writing your update readmes to version bump your code. Let your CI/CD manage that. If you want an example of this, Microsoft has this tool called Pico Logging that we use internally. It's available to the public for you to use as well. It actually sped up a lot of our Python deployments by about, I'm not going to throw a number out there. The logging portion of it, we saw 40% increases in performance just based on that. And that I can say we have data that pushes that. And if you look at who updated the last dev container for that, it was me. I did it. Open source contributions for the win. I'm part of the 0.1%. Let's go. Take that, Bernie. Oh, sorry. Next, we're going to look at data science. I'm not a data scientist, but I work with one who's amazing. Her name is Dr. Sarah Kaiser. Thank you, Sarah, for helping me with this. She gave me some great advice. One, the data science community, they use Conda. They don't know what pip is. Also, there's a new thing on the street called Mamba. Mamba makes your installs go burr, literally. Like it just speeds everything up, and it's great. So if you want to make that as a feature, cool. If what you're doing isn't great for Mamba, this is the great thing about dev containers. Just erase the line, and you're still good. No problems. Also, you can suggest extensions like the Jupyter Notebook extension, the Python extension. You can make sure that your default interpreter path is set to that environment. You can make sure that your Jupyter Notebook's path is set correctly. All of these go in that JSON file. And again, for more examples of that, Dr. Sarah Kaiser is going to be doing a specific talk about dev containers in respect to data science next week at PyCascades, and you can still get virtual tickets, or if you're going to be in Vancouver, British Columbia, you can just go in person. And also, thank you for letting me borrow this repo to learn from. And yeah, open source for the win. I love it. Next is one that I am specifically in love with, and these are full stack applications. These get a little busy, okay? Like when we talk about all the things that are inside of a full stack application, yeah, we got all of that. We got things like Postgres. You might be running Django on the back end, React on the front end. You might be using Locust to load test your tools. You might be using Redis to do caching. You might be using Elasticsearch because Elasticsearch is awesome. You can talk to me about Elasticsearch all day and we'll go there. But you might have all of these different things happening in your system, and guess what? The person working on your code doesn't need most of this. Not gonna lie, they don't need most of this. And this is where using a Docker Compose instance is really, really cool, because you can have two services. You can have your development that doesn't include all of this stuff, and then you can have your production that does have all this stuff in the same file. You can have your dev container point to the development service of this, and now you don't have to manage two separate configurations, one for everybody else to use and one for your server to use. It all lives in one area, big happy family. You haven't done anything, and again, your dev container, all you're gonna do is change that Docker Compose path to your Docker Compose path, and that's it. Also, there is a feature called Docker in Docker. I have been told that it works, but I have also been told that Dockerception is a very dangerous thing. I saw the movie. You don't want to get stuck 15 Docker images in, so use with caution, okay? Also, we have some extensions like the Docker extension. We also have some SQL Tools extensions that you can use. And there's a great port forwarding tool that is available there. How much time do I have left? We got plenty of time left. My goodness. They should not have given me this much time to talk. If you want some examples of that, my other colleague, Pamela Fox, who's absolutely amazing, has made several examples, but one of my favorites that she's done is a flash survey app. I will also say there's one where she did for, if there are any nursing mothers out there, she created a Django application that allows you to manage like your pumping schedule and things like that. I wish my wife would have had that when we had our first kid, because first of all, I was like, hey, you're using Django, that's awesome. Like, she wouldn't have cared, sorry. So now, before you go, I wanted to show a little demo. And because Rizelle spoke before me, and she was absolutely awesome, I'm gonna try to one-up her, but I can already see a flaw in my planning is that my screen isn't mirrored, so I can't see what I'm doing. Let me fix that really quick. Okay, cool, you can see what I'm doing now. All right, so, don't look at that. We're gonna go to GitHub. We're gonna go to my personal website's repo, which is .com. There we go. So this is the repo for my personal website. If you want to just see what it looks like to make sure I'm not lying, it looks like that. It's pretty plain. I'm pretty plain. That's okay. So I want to add a blog post or a micro blog post because we're all trying to get a little bit further away from Twitter and stuff. So I figured, why not just make my own Twitter for my own personal website that only I get to contribute to, and if you want to look at it, that's on you. So I see we have a dev container here. I'm going to look at that dev container really quick. Oh, I see I'm using I was using the classic Docker in Docker thing, but I wanted to make it really easy for me. And instead what I'm doing is I'm using just the base Python 3.11 image. My features are this dev container for NeoVim, because again, we talked about this already. I love me some NeoVim. I want to make sure that I got it. And we're also installing it from apt-get. Apt-get means that it's actually going to run sudo apt-get install, and it's going to update all of my apt-get stuff for me, because features can depend on other features. That's how that works. And then I have a bunch of settings for my Python interpreter path and all those fun things. Things like flake 8. So for those people who said they want to make sure that the code follows your standard, your schema, you can do things like have them run flake 8. You can make sure they're running things like black or auto pep 8 and things like that to make sure that their code, when they check it in, is going to look the way that you expect it to look and follow the conventions that you want it to follow. I'm sure this is probably hard to read. There we go. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. There we go. Yeah, people can see. None of what you're looking at isn't that important. My computer said no. Sorry. Try again. Yes? Maybe? Okay, cool. I'm gonna try not to move my fingers in any weird directions. My laptop might get mad at me. And I even have some base extensions installed here, which are the Python extension, GitLens, which is an amazing tool for VS Code if you want to learn more about what's happening in your Git repo. The Copilot extension, because I'm lazy and I like my code writing itself for me. And Copilot Labs, because I just like it. And I have it not running as remote user. Actually, I don't think I have any of these because I commented them out, but that's fine. Normally, I would uncomment these, but we are at a conference where conference Wi-Fi is a problem, okay? So we're not going to do that. So I talked earlier about code spaces. If people have specific questions around code spaces, I'm happy to answer them later. But in order to create a code space, you just hit the code button like you would normally go to pull down a repo. You hit the code spaces tag here. And what should we do? Should we use the one that already works, or should we test the demo gods and create a new one? Demo gods. Okay, that's what I heard first. Okay, we're going to hit this button. Oh, it's like, are you sure? It was like, I really don't want to do this. Setting up our code space. Image found. It's building the container. Oh, we got some logs. Hope we don't have to view them later. Come on. Clap for the computer, please. Give it some. Come on. Come on. Laptop, you're failing me. Come on, let's go. While we're waiting, does anybody have a question so far? Never mind, it's built. Hold your question for later. I'm kidding. What's your question? Yes. I'm pretty sure right now you have to call it devcontainer.json. Yeah. In VS Code, no. If you were going to use like the Devcontainer CLI, then yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Well, you wouldn't use it on NeoVim, but you would use it and then use NeoVim to interact with your files there. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have what looks like a VS Code window. As we can see, it's telling me, hey, you installed some stuff. This is great. I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to use some of my Mac automation here stuff. Anybody like love Mac automation? Because, okay, I see one. I'm using a tool called Drafts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm giving a talk about Devcontainers, if I can spell, right after I stopped at the the container store this afternoon, which is true. I also have this image here that I'm just going to say it's the image from earlier. We're going to say container store. This isn't me showcasing my fancy static site generator that I've made and been maintaining by myself for 5 years. If you want to help contribute to that, go right ahead. Oh, I said that out loud, my bad. Then we're going to add some front matter on here because that's what my static site generator that I want you to help me maintain uses. And we're going to go in here. We're going to create a, not there. We're not. We're going to go into our content. We're going to go into our microblog. We're going to right-click, hit new file. I love torture sometimes, so I name it in this weird, goofy way because why not? It's going to create this file. We're going to paste that in. And now I'm going to do a couple of things because we chose the painful path. I am going to do python-m pip install -r. Again, as I mentioned before, we could have this do that for us by using that post create command. Have it point to our requirements.txt. It's going to install some things. How did I know that Python 3.11 was already installed? Because it was the image that we used. So I didn't have to worry about what version of Python am I running and everything else. All of my stuff there is installed. I can now run my magic incantation, which is render engine serve -- build, and I'm going to point to my routes and my site. And fingers crossed. Okay, cool. It started replacing some YouTube IDs. It started building out all of my files. And if everything worked, what we should get at the end is a little link that I can click and view in my browser locally from GitHub. So here's the cool thing. This dev container does not live on my computer, yet it's telling me to go to localhost 8000. How does that work? Well, it just tells us, hey, we noticed that you just opened a port 8000. Should we set up port forwarding for you? Yes, please do. And if I open in the browser, what we should see after it connects the port, hey, I'm giving a talk about dev containers right after I stopped at the container store this afternoon. And, sorry, it's still pulling things in, and this is still the internet. Wow, this is the 90s, like AOL dial-up style. Come on. If someone wants to contribute to my code to like get some CSS like pre-style stuff going, but this is the image I took. This is the message that y'all watched me write. If y'all remember on my website, that wasn't the message that's there. If I refresh this page on my actual website, it's still not there, proving that I did not publish anything. But when we want to get back to our contributions, I can, because I'm in my preferred GitHub environment. I can use the Git system here. I can say, new live post from scale. I can commit that. I can push that. And then I can go over here. And what we should see is a new GitHub action that started that's now posting my live microblog post via GitHub Actions. So as you can see, I didn't have anything on my computer. There is no Docker running. Well, Docker's installed. It's not running because, again, this presentation would not happen if that were the case. But without having any of this stuff, any of this system, any of these extensions installed on my computer, I was able to go into GitHub, see that there was a dev container involved, go to the code space, pull that code down, and trust that I could write code just like I would be doing on my local machine. Now, there is this beautiful feature of code spaces that allows you to pull that code space down and work remotely from your local machine. So if you don't want to sit there in a browser all day where like every time you do this, it messes it up, or if you're like me and you hit like Command-Shift-X to get to your extensions, and instead it's like you triggered some Safari extension. Let's figure out what you're doing. Like, if you don't want any of that, you can take your extension, or you can take your instance of that dev container and run it on your local machine. Or if you are the type that just has Docker sitting on a laptop for no reason at all, you can just run the dev container directly from that itself. All right, so we're going to wrap up slides here because I'm pretty sure I am so almost out of time. Where did my PowerPoint presentation go? Oh, my computer was like, whoa, you're trying to do too many things at once, homie. You need to chill out with that. Okay, let's swipe down really fast. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. How much time do I have? I have like 10 minutes. I got time. We're cool, we're cool, we're cool. So, okay, as I mentioned before, there is a balancing act. Your features are easy to add. However, it is more performant if you put them in the image. The caveat to that is, if it's in the image, your base image size will be larger, obviously, because it has to load all that stuff in. So if storage is the thing that you're constrained on, you may want to go the base image with features route. If performance is what you're looking for, take those features, go to their Git repo, and look at what they're building. It's usually a shell script. You can find that shell script. It follows a standard. I believe it's like run.shell or something like that. But you can find that shell script. You can copy and paste that code, put it in your Docker image, and then now that is in your base. Once you package that down into a new image, you can load directly from that image. Now that image does need to live somewhere. I would suggest the GitHub container registry because you can have it in GitHub with your stuff, and then everything's one big happy family right there. And when I talk about it slowing down your build time, 3 features took 8 times as long to build. So again, you got to do the dance. Our hope is on our side at Microsoft, we're working to make that experience even more performant. So, till then, think about it. Some other tips really quick, and then we're going to get into the question round. Sync settings. If you're using code spaces and you have VS Code on your local machine and you want that experience to be pretty fluid, use sync settings. You just go into settings, just type in the word sync, it'll be there. It's a checkbox. Now, anytime you are logged into an instance of VS Code, I also suggest sign into VS Code using your GitHub account, because then when you go into a code space, all of your existing settings will be there for you. 2, favorite extensions. I like using Copilot. I would probably not put Copilot in my base extensions for any of my dev containers because 1, you have to pay for Copilot. So other people that are trying to contribute, they're going to be like, what's this thing and why am I getting prompted with the free trial? I don't know, I'm scared, I'm going to leave. But if me as a Copilot user, I want to use Copilot on everything. So I can actually mark what my favorite extensions are in VS Code, and now anytime I create a new project or I open up a new code space, the first thing that it will do is install those extensions for me. So I can have my favorite extensions everywhere I go. And number 3, there is no number 3. That actually makes the end of my presentation. Again, if you want to talk with me, if you have comments, catch me in the hallway. If you have questions, I've got 10 minutes. So at this point, I will open the floor up. And I won't get down until someone asks me a question, I promise you. Okay. Oh, man. Okay. No. Again, I built my own static site generator that just uses front matter and Markdown 2, the Python package. And then it uses some class-based stuff. It's called Render Engine if you want to look it up. I would rather you not use it. I would rather you help contribute to it and make it better. Because again, I don't want to be responsible for other people's stuff. That terrifies me. Any other questions? Yes? I'm a Vim's user, so get out. I'm kidding. I'm not sure if there's an Emacs feature. I've never tried to add it. There was a QR code here, I think. If you want to use PyCharm instead of VS Code, I will first say that Devcontainers is an open spec. So PyCharm, if they developed it, could support this feature. At this time, they have not. The only JetBrains IDE that has support for it is Rider. But again, if you're using something like the Devcontainer CLI, if you're okay with operating in the window, like in the terminal, you could technically use it with that. In terms of what features, like what's the scope of features that are available, right now we have a list. Like I said, I believe it is one of those QR codes. I can find it for you. If you want to know like what that list is, like let me know. We'll look it up. It is pretty extensive. Like everything from different linters, like is Black installed, to I want to use Homebrew on my Linux system for some reason. you can do that as well. One caveat that I did forget to mention when it comes to using features, you're at the beholder of the feature maintainer, which means that sometimes if you're using something cough cough M1 device, they probably have not remembered to put the dash platform equals AMD64 in the build. One workaround for that is if you have a base image that you're using, your Docker file can include that. So you can actually have it run dash platform AMD64 and then that thing. That's something that I tend to do on mine because I do use M1 devices while I use M1, M2 devices. So yeah, there are a lot of great features. I can't promise all of them will be compatible with the system that you're using. You'll have to be able to look at that. The good thing is the actual URL that you use will often give you a hint to where you can go find that feature in GitHub. Did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry, I saw some of this. Oh, here, I do that, well, I just shake it like that, but yes. I don't know. There are some amazing people from GitHub in the audience. If they have an answer. Okay. You said you were looking at plans, and my first thought was like, why are you doing that? It's free for like 40 hours a month, or 60 hours a month, I'm sorry, 60 hours a month. I know startups that are like, yo, our like development infrastructure bill is like $8 a month because we just use code spaces for everything. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's your usage of code spaces as a whole, you get 60 hours for free. Yeah. Yes. Oh man, I wish you were in the talk right before this because she answered it so beautifully. There is a setting there. So do you know like GitHub has the ability to store secrets, right? There's a special section that you can actually store secrets for code spaces. And it'll expose those secrets to each code space that you run. So if you have settings that you want via like environment variable, you can use that. Outside of code spaces, I would suggest if you have like, are you talking about just like storing like secrets in your environment variables? If you're doing that, you could put that in, like if you have like a .env file, you could put that in your actual docker compose.yaml and just say, hey, pull from this environment. Same thing for your Docker Compose. Again, I would warn against that because that means that now you're expecting other contributors to have the same thing. I will often yield, I'm an Azure user for reasons, obviously. We have a tool called Secure Keys that we use. Like we have a key vault thing where we store things in that and then we call those keys by like a command so that they're still available, but you don't have to worry about embedding them or having an env file or even like a fake env file for people to use. So again, it depends. I know that's the answer that everyone hates is it depends, but in this case you have a couple of options. Code spaces seems to be the easiest of those, but if you don't want to use code spaces, there are some options for you as well. And I will say that .env file thing is kind of common. A lot of people, once they realize how easy code spaces are to set up, even if they're like solo developers and they're only using code spaces for themselves, it still is a really good experience to get your code up and running and have all those things that you're looking for ready to go for you. And people will build their own special images that they use and that they pull from, and it's becoming its own little ecosystem. And honestly, I'm just here with popcorn, like the Michael Jackson meme, just like, let's go, like I'm ready for it. All right, we got 3 minutes that I will give back, but thank you so much. I've been Jay Miller. Y'all been an awesome audience.